So our topic is on engagement in computer science classrooms. This is by Professor Choi-Carlson and myself, Mallery. So computer science and informational technology are the jobs of tomorrow that we always talk about preparing our students for. So to do this, we must gain student interest in the computer science class because this is our future and a part of the unknown that we've been preparing our students for. So projected employment growth of computer science is that by 2029, we should have an 11% increase with 500,000 jobs created in the field of computer science and informational technologies. So capturing interest to increase engagement in computer science classes is going to be really important on all of our behalves because in order for us to have these jobs of the future, our students have to be trained to do them. So one of the strategies that we came up with from our research is enhancing the interactivity of curriculum through the use of effective multimedia components that capture the learner's attention and allow the learner to understand how the material is being utilized. Another strategy is to engage the computer science students with real world applications. We both use code.org, and in using code.org, we have seen that it aligns very much so with a lot of the strategies that we read about.
Another strategy that can keep students in computer science is using technology to support learning. In a research done at a university, despite the students acknowledging the downsides to having ICTs in the classroom, not only were the majority of the students against banning ICTs from the classroom, but they were also against any policies restricting their use. As a good example, recently a Canadian university implemented its own laptop ban. However, the students were really upset, and what they did was they started a social media campaign encouraging the use of hashtag #SayNoToLaptopBan. This suggests that students' lack of support applies not just to hypothetical but also to actual policies restricting classroom ICT use. Technology, however, alone cannot guarantee student engagement and retention. Technology has to be used in a purposeful manner.
Applications in introductory computer science classes that we found were collaboration, connection to real life, use of technology, fostering creativity, self-evaluation and reflection, and multimedia components. Based on our findings, we made minor modifications to increase the engagement in our lessons that will incorporate specific teaching strategies to efficiently engage students in learning computer science.
So in Code.org Computer Science Discoveries, Unit 4, Lessons 1 through 4, the objectives that is originally there is using the design process, empathize with the user, and design smart clothing. So in Lesson 1, and I have attached the activity guide in that little box that says L1, what the students do is they look at different shoes and evaluate how the design meets user needs. The lesson asks students to look at the design from a different user's perspective, but it also asks students for their thoughts on specific designs of shoes. According to the research that I read, all else being equal, it follows that students will be more interested in learning activities that are more meaningful to their personal life worlds. So I thought it was a good thing that the lesson asked students for their opinions about the shoes and how it should be modified. In addition to using the lesson as is provided, I would also introduce the concept of smart clothing in this lesson, since in Lesson 4, students are expected to design one. And this is to include the strategic communicative action. So that is part of the Learning and Teaching as Communicative Actions theoretical framework. And in this framework, there are 4 communicative actions, and one of them was what I just mentioned earlier. So over here, the strategic communicative actions are explicit in their expectations and directives, and this forms the foundation for students' knowledge. So this is something that it can come in the form of a video, a book, a play, or any media form, but this is like the basis where the students get introduced to the content. And so the original framework for LTCA builds on German pragmatist Jürgen Habermas. And the 4 communicative actions are normative, strategic, constitutive, and dramaturgical communicative actions. So in lesson 2, what students will be doing is the provided lesson plan have students select one of the 4 provided user profiles and react to different items and design them from the user's perspective. However, what I felt after doing my research is that it's difficult for the students to emphasize with a user that they are not familiar with. And so what I would like to do is provide one user profile that is already provided to us by the curriculum, and using that as an example, have students create their own user profile based on people around them. For example, their uncle, auntie, maybe their best friend, and so on. So over here, students who are, Baxter Magolda's study suggests students who are able to use their own experience when learning new material or ideas and connecting that, they are more capable of self-authorship, which is what we're trying to do here. And so from the lens of these user profiles that the students created, now they're going to look at 8 different chairs and redesign the chair for their user. And they can choose to use any method to do a presentation. So these are the 8 chairs that they have to look at, and pretending to be the user that they created, they have to try and make modifications on the design. So when the students do a presentation on their modification of the chair, they can use various platforms. So in the provided lesson plan, it just has students draw the newly designed chair and kind of share what they did and the reasons why. But after doing this research, I felt like it would be more beneficial if students choose to, for maybe some students, they want to draw the couch that they modified on the whiteboard and kind of explain why that's a better design for their user. Maybe another student just wants to draw something on butcher paper. Maybe some students want to do a presentation using a slide deck. Maybe they want to pre-record and show a YouTube video. It's really up to them, but I'm going to go ahead and give them multiple platforms or freedom of choice when they do their presentation for this one, to make sure I incorporate dramaturgical communicative action. Then in lesson 3, we start designing smart clothing, and this time they do not have to look from the lens of the user profile that they created, although they could form the basis, and what they have to do is choose a user group and then think about what this user group might need. Because in lesson 1 and 2, students already practice modifying a chair and during their presentations, they are now ready to create their smart clothing. They're going to work this time in groups of 2 to 4 and decide what kind of smart clothing they will design for a specific user group and their needs. So then in lesson 4, they're going to actually design the smart clothing. They're going to present their product and make changes based on feedback in lesson 4. So the original framework for LTCA, I already talked about the 4 communicative actions, and the normative communicative action just means teachers have rules. And I already talked about strategic and dramaturgical. However, I did not talk about constitutive. And what that is that as teachers, we need to facilitate students to have discourse with each other so that they can actually learn from each other, and then from that base, they have to maybe go beyond and do more research. Maybe they do more reading, maybe they ask people, or maybe they go online to do some search. And so the provided lesson already encouraged students to discuss with each other and learn from each other. But as a teacher's point of view, the best way to see that portion of the four communicative actions in action will be through making sure the students do the presentation on the smart clothing and then require the participants to provide feedback and somehow put that into the gradebook. And as a result of receiving the feedback, I'm going to require my students to now spend another day to redo their smart clothing design to make sure that I include that portion of the human learning process. According to social constructivism, learning only occurs when students can share their background knowledge and participate in collaborative and cooperative activities. And so I think this is going to be a great way for students to not only work on their smart clothing, but then receive feedback and then, based on that feedback, redo their design.
So, in lesson 10 of that same unit, students start to move from designing smart clothing into designing an app. Um, and so, in the unit for lesson 10, the students will be looking at doing research so that they can create an app that is beneficial to either a specified user or group, or just one that will help to change the world in some way. So the objectives for this one is that they'll evaluate a design based on its ability to meet a targeted user's needs, and then evaluate the purpose and impact of the computational artifact. So they start the lesson by doing market research on similar apps. So if they came up with an app, say for smart clothing, so to digitize, like if they wanted to just use what they did in chapter one of the lesson within that 1 through 4, they could use lesson 10 as a way to digitize it. So make it so that it's the app's reactive to the clothing, if they so chose to do that. They will be having to know their audience. So when they're doing their research, they'll have to see apps that they like that align with the app they're considering building, and make that determination as a team. So, in terms of teaching strategies that come already embedded, they have connection to real life because they're doing the research on an existing app. So, things that they're already interested in. And then they're going to use the technology. So researching the app with the specific audience in mind. And then the collaboration, because they'll be designing this app in groups of 3 to 4. To build on that from our research, I would say that I would have the students to uh, really consider what they did in the first part of the unit and 1 through 4, looking back at the connections between what they're now building the app for and what they did in the previous part of the unit. So just to make that connection, so that they're building on that um, collaboration, because we really, for this section, it kind of is solid on its own, but just to have them reflect back on what they've done so that it doesn't seem like far-fetched from what they've already done. Uh, And then when they get to lesson 12, that's when students built their paper prototypes. So they take their app idea, they put it on paper on a 3x5 card, and they build out their different screens of their app. And I believe 13, they'll also take those paper prototypes and test them. So the objective there is to create a paper prototype that incorporates the user's flow and the computational artifacts, and then explain the role of the paper prototype in the app development. So again, using a lot of that collaboration and creativity that comes from um, building the app. So they have to plan each screen, and each team member will build a screen. So each member of the team will have a specific screen that they build. So they'll have that input on the creativity of the app, um, through their sketches, through their descriptions, and they'll also have um, the connection to real life, because it's something that eventually they will digitize and have it as an actual app, that if they wanted to, they could potentially sell. So really, that real world, real life connection there in terms of strategies and the collaboration, because they're working in teams, and then having them use that creativity, which we found in our research is really big, because when they take ownership of it, it creates um, that whole connection of engagement and wanting to be a part of the class. So then when they get to lesson 15 is when they start to build the digital version of their paper prototype. So they'll have built the paper prototype. They would have tested it on other groups by having them show them how it works, going through the different parts of the screens. Like, okay, so if you want to do, like, for instance, it is have them say, so if you want to get to home screen, what do you have to push? And on paper, they would show them how to go about that, so that by the time they get to the digital one, which is lesson 15, they're able to build their screens according to feedback from their peers, um, which they would have had to do some self-reflection on, like, okay, so when so and so did this, it didn't work so well, so we had to modify it so that this icon was easier to find, or this icon actually took you to where you wanted to go. So again, using the self-reflection part of the teaching strategies, and then the use of technology, because now they took what was once paper and made it into a digital version of their vision, and then collaboration coming through each person in the group doing 1 to 2 of those screens, that works the app for them. And then we have lesson 21. So when they get to 21, they've built their digital app, they've tested it, they've had other groups try it, and now they're presenting on what they've learned, their prototype, and pretty much marketing it to their classmates, because they'll be doing a presentation that talks about the technical information and non-technical information of their app itself, and reflecting on the development of the ongoing project. Because even though that project will have ended with 21, they can still go back, modify, and build on all of what they've learned from having done so. So for 21, they'll do a PowerPoint, which is again utilizing that multimedia. So they did paper, they did digital, and now they're doing a PowerPoint. So they've utilized different aspects in different multimedia software in order to create this. And then in the presentation, they had to what have had to divide up who's going to say what and when, and how they want to present that. And then, of course, at the end, they'll do a self reflection, a questionnaire, reflecting on their experience with having done this unit, and how they would make it better, which would be like a building upon activity that they could all engage in. So that's how I would um, further advance this one, is have them to reflect and discuss on how they could better do it based on peer feedback, based on their experience and everything that they've done. And then we're going into our works cited. So here's our works cited, all of our sources.
All right, thank you.